Nebraska's first fast food restaurant in 1959, Broncos Hamburgers has been thrilling customers with burgers, fries, fried chicken. I mean, it is a restaurant that diehards will like. They will go to the ground fighting over because they love it so much. And I think that there are reasons why it has just become so ingrained in the Omaha community. Hey there, Omaha. Welcome into another episode of Restaurant Hoppen. I'm your host, Dan Hoppen, and since it became Nebraska's first fast food restaurant in 1959, Broncos Hamburgers has been thrilling customers with burgers, fries, fried chicken. I mean, it is a restaurant that diehards will like. They will go to the ground fighting over because they love it so much. And I think that there are reasons why it has just become so ingrained in the Omaha community. And what better person to talk to about that than the general manager and the grandson of the founder, and that is Mr. Blake Barnes. Blake, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dan. Nice to meet you, and I really appreciate the time that you've put into what you do and for the platform that you're allowing me to speak on.
Of course. You are a wonderful guest to have on today because, like I said, Broncos is, I mean, it's been an Omaha institution for decades and decades now. I mean, you guys are coming up on, well, my math is so good, 70 years here
Yeah.
in a couple of years. When you think about the legacy that Broncos has created and what your family has created through it, what makes you most proud?
You know, to be candid, it's really the city of Omaha that's kept us alive and thriving for so many years. And so I just think of all of the people that we've been able to feed and employ. Really, the very first thing that comes to my mind is a gentleman named Henry Rice. And you had mentioned you'd done some research, and we can probably talk about that. But Henry is so near and dear to our family. He was one of our very first employees that was hired back in 1959 by my grandfather, Grandpa Bill Barnes, who started it all. He had another drive-in called Prima Drive-In before this, and Henry worked for him as a car hop when he was 14 years old. And my grandfather saw, opportunity and he saw talent in him, and he thought, this kid's going to go somewhere. I'm going to bring him in. And he didn't even bring him in as a manager, not at 14, but at 14 he started working for us, and he worked for my grandfather for 20 years. He had the same birthday as my grandfather, and my grandpa and him were pretty close, and he helped to open a lot of the stores for my grandpa over the years. But he worked for us until the day he died about 2 years ago, so for about 65 years. And so he worked for Grandpa for 20 years, and then Grandpa died. Then he worked for Grandma for 20 years, and then she passed away. And then he worked for my dad for 20 more years. My dad retired, brought me in 2016, and then worked for me for about 8 years before he passed away.
As I was doing my homework and preparing for this, Blake, I was, thinking, I was like, okay, we're going to be talking about 65, 66 years of history here.
A lot of history.
I wonder how much of a historian Blake is. Like, is he going to know everything? Is he going to want to talk about everything? Or is he going to just be a little bit more in the present? I have no such fears anymore.
Yeah.
You would know you just named off like 5 or 6 timelines immediately.
Yeah.
So we're going to be able to talk history of Broncos. But first, I want to ask you a little bit more about Henry.
Sure.
What made that guy special? I mean, since you've been born, he's been a part of your life. You've seen this guy. And as I went through Broncos social media, I was like, your logo is like a cowboy on a horse.
Right.
After that, your secondary logo is Henry. His face is everywhere. Yeah. What was it about this guy?
The man was just the most benevolent person as far as just selfless. I mean, he really he didn't look at himself as like a fast food manager. He looked at himself as more like somebody who was teaching kids through life, because a lot of the people that he employed, this was their first job. Some of them that went on to be managers and stick with us for quite a long time. We'll talk about that too. His right-hand man, Sue, the vegan, who hand cuts all of our pork tenderloins and hand breads all of our chicken, has been with us 42 years now, and they were kind of a duo for many, many years. But one of his things is he thought, if this is going to be their first job, then I'm going to teach them how to be respectful, how to be on time, how to be responsible, how to smile, let them know that they're on stage. He just embodied Broncos, and he embodied, a perfect employee. And I don't just say that because he's not here. I mean, we said that, I remember when he was alive, I'd be like, you're a legend, right? Yeah, I know that. Come on, let's move on. Let's get going. You got to get on the ball here, son. So he was just amazing. But that was his thing, is like I said, he wasn't just the fast food manager. He was really teaching kids through life, and he was a really big family man, and he just loved Broncos. Like him and my grandfather were good friends, and he always talked about how well he treated him, and he just, it was just a humble servant.
That reminds me, now I can't remember who it is, but there was some celebrity who visited Walt Disney World many years ago and saw a custodian and asked him, hey, what's your job here? And the custodian said, or it was a custodian at NASA. Sorry, I'm leaving out very important details. And the custodian said, well, my job is I help put people on the moon. And that's so much like what you just said with Henry.
Yeah.
If you just think of yourself as, I'm a manager at a fast food restaurant, I've been doing this for 6 decades, that might get old after a while. Right. Maybe people might even say, well, why haven't you advanced or anything like that? But no, he's saying, well, I'm someone who's empowering, young others. Employees. Yeah. I'm giving people a chance. It was always about others with him. Yes, I'm feeding people.
Yeah.
I mean, when you talk about him, when you talk about the other employee you just mentioned, who's been with you 42 years.
Sue Galinsky, yeah.
Those are obviously extreme examples, but there are people who have worked for Broncos for years and years and years. What is it about the company that keeps people around?
I've asked them that because there are a lot. There's, like I said, Don and John Zielinski. They were with us for 50 years. There's Gerald, who works on our Leavenworth store. He's still with us 45 years. Cedric is running the store. He's been there 30 years. I mean, it goes on and on and on. Joe worked for us for about 50 years. He just retired this year. And I asked him, what is it? What keeps them sticking around? And all of them are like, well, it's not the big corporate America. You're not constantly, in our face when we want to do something or address something. You guys as owners and managers are there. It's the family that started it. We couldn't be closer to the vest as far as, cutting through red tape. And so I think they enjoy that, and they know that we listen, and we don't, I think that, in the society that we have now where everything is built to break and replace, we're like, everybody makes mistakes, and even if they made mistakes, like we don't just replace them. It's not a replace culture. It's a let's fix it, like the old school. Let's fix it and make sure that we address it, and then going forward, let's be better together and stronger as a team. And so I think that camaraderie that the team has together, that has all worked so close together for so long, that chemistry and stuff, you just can't recreate that. It's very genuine, and it's something that I think is special to all the people that work there.
Mm-hmm. Now, you talk about not breaking and replacing things. The world is, especially the food world, it is constantly changing. There are new
breaking, and changing.
There are new innovations. Yes. There are new fads. There are new cooking methods. There are new ingredients that come up. What is it like for you as the leader now at Broncos? How do you balance the traditions and the things that were special to Broncos that made it the institution that it is, while also acknowledging, hey, there are things that we have to do to help Broncos continue to be this Omaha beacon into the future? How do you balance
it's such a complicated question, and it's simple but doesn't make it easy. There's a lot of facets to it that I think through, because there is something about being an institution and being the stability. Like, for instance, during COVID and stuff, the one thing that people didn't want out of daily life and things that they were accustomed to was change. And that's all we were going through as a society and as a world at that time, was change. And they could go into Broncos, the same place that they'd been going, since their grandfather or grandmother took them there, since their father took them there, for generations, with the same people making their burger that had made it generations ago. And they could have that sense of family and time together and timelessness that a burger and French fries that are just made simple and good will stand the test of time. Like, you look at, a lot of people talk about smash burgers. These things are the greatest stuff. That's what we've been doing since 1959. We have a thinner patty, and there's a reason for that, because it cooks all the way through in a faster time. When you put another piece of cheese on the double cheeseburger, and then another piece of meat and another piece of cheese on our double cheeseburger, you've got 2 pieces of meat, 2 pieces of cheese that are stacked together, and when you bite it, it has that meat cheese ratio that keeps it like juicy, and it's simple. But versus 2 thin slices of cheese on top of a really thick patty, it's not the same bite to it. But that timeless food and just attention to quality that goes through fads and stuff, it doesn't change. Like the French fries, we have 2 ingredients. It's it's salt and a potato, and I guess if you consider the grease that you fry it in, that's the third one. But other than that, it's just simple and it's good and it's consistent, and I think it's just part of Americana. It's like, who doesn't love good burgers and fries?
I agree with all that.
Yeah.
On the same level, though, I went back and I looked over the past, I don't even know, 7-8 years, and we've seen a lot of Omaha institutions close.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking Anthony's Steakhouse,
Yes.
Joe Test Place, Ethnic Sandwich Shop, Amato's, Johnny Sortino's just closed a few months ago here.
Yeah.
And obviously there are varying reasons
Right.
for all of those. Sometimes it's retirements, old age, something happens in the family. That doesn't necessarily mean that the business was failing, but those places have closed, and so have others. Broncos has continued, and it's what's so difficult about storied restaurants is, as your clientele and the people who love your restaurant, for much of their life, as they kind of age into that next part of their lives, you have to attract the new generation, and
Right.
you have to show them, hey, this isn't just a place for your parents to love. This is a place for you to love too. And I think a lot of restaurants have struggled to do that, but you guys haven't.
I think
When I've gone in there, I see people who are my age who are older than me, and I also see kids and
Yeah.
teens running
Yeah.
around and stuff. How have you been able to bridge all the generations?
I think the main thing is that food. We're not trying to be something that we're not. We're true to the food, number one, and we're true to the customer, number two. But I think it's just being updated on your social media platforms. I have to give my dad a lot of credit. He started our Facebook page back in, I think, 2008.
Wow.
And he was doing social media, very, very early, and paying for it. He didn't know what the value was, but he saw it was cool, and he's always been kind of a tech guy. I remember when I was a kid, I remember going to Radio Shack with him, and we'd build radios and stuff, and we were all kind of techie. I came from the tech world before. I was in sales and marketing in the technology world for many years before I took over Broncos in 2016. And so just staying on those platforms, as far as all social media platforms, we've of course gone on Instagram, and Facebook was kind of the first, but then we've really adopted all of them. We've kept the technology as far as the cash registers and the way that we run the business efficient and streamlined. But as far as the staying in front of like the younger audience, I think it's passed down generationally. Like I said, it was a treat for the grandparents. It's a treat for the parents. It's a treat for the grandkids and the great grandkids. And as long as they come, I think the food and the service and everything speaks for itself. The environments are quite different. We've got 2 locations. The one on 120th and Pacific is about a 4,500 square foot building. One on Leavenworth is about a 1,500 square foot building. So we can't offer the same kinds of experiences in-house when you walk into the building as that we maybe can offer more on Pacific. But, you've got that MCM, that mid-century modern feel, and that turn-of-the-century vibe to both buildings. But the one on Leavenworth is kind of that old school where you'd walk up and they'd slide the window and, what are you having? And then they'd give it to you. And it's kind of that old school 50s diner feel, because that's real. That's not a feel. That's what it is. And, we didn't even add drive-thrus until the 90s. I think my dad added the drive-thrus. That was really helpful to business. And so we've just basically kept up with the way that people are consuming media and consuming the food. We've really gone heavy into a lot of the deliveries, which, to be candid, that's difficult for me because I don't order a lot. But again, I'm 49 years old, but I've always been a technology guy, so I will do it, and I do see the value in it. But the difficulty for us being a fast food restaurant with fresh French fries that I always say expire before they leave the parking lot. You better finish them before you leave the parking lot, shake them up in a bag of salt and consume them all. When they get delivered, 20 minutes later, 30 minutes later, and it's the first time you've ever had Broncos and that's your experience, that's really difficult for me to palate that, people are ordering it and they're enjoying it, but then it's sometimes, do you have to put it in the microwave on the burger, or do you have to put it in the air fryer for the fries? I mean, you should if you want to enjoy that fresh experience, or just better yet, come on in and have it fresh and made for you. And it's not that it's not fresh after 30 minutes, but any food holds its
especially something that's
fast food. Yeah, for sure. So, but yeah, to answer the question fully, I think we've kept in a good pulse on how people consume media, and then just kept a really good eye on the food quality. We don't change anything. If anything, we just get more efficient with the way that we make it, as far as the speeds of times and stuff. But the way that the food is made and the ingredients and stuff, that just hasn't changed at all. So I think that's why it's just good food. It's really good.
Well, let's talk about the speed, because that's something that fascinates me. Mm-hmm. Most fast food restaurants rely on the deep freezer to survive.
Right.
They got to be storing burgers in there. They're storing fries in there, so they can, when there's a rush, they can just go in there, grab some, pull them out, throw them on the flat top, throw them in the fryer, and go. You guys don't do that.
We don't.
You don't use frozen beef.
Nope.
You hand cut the fries every day.
We hand cut the onions. We hand cut all the produce. So it's there's a lot of prep that goes into it, and that's the thing, is we may open at 9 a.m., which is late considering we serve breakfast all day, but we do get in at 4:30 in the morning at both stores, and that's 5 days a week to be able to prep, because we have a slicer that slices the onions, but we're hand cutting the pork tenderloin. It's a whole pork tenderloin that we have to hand cut each individual piece, and then we have to double tenderize it through a tenderizing machine. Then we hand bread it, and then we prepare it, and so that prep is really, I think, what gets us to be able to get through lunch. And there's really nothing on our menu that takes longer than 4 minutes to cook, other than chicken. But chicken is usually up, and it will be up until the next round sells, and then it's never out for more than, say, 30-45 minutes, and it holds in a heater. But other than that, there's nothing that takes longer than 4 minutes to actually cook. The fries, they're a double fried fry, so they're fried, they're blanched or par fried, I guess, in a 4-minute French fry, and then they hang to dry, and then when it's time to order them, they get put in the hot fryer, and it takes a couple minutes until they turn golden brown, and we serve them to the customer. But if just doing the fries is actually 6 minutes, and if everyone waited 6 minutes for fries, that would ruin the whole business model, and it would not be a fast food, nor would it be drive-through. So there's been a lot of thought and consideration that's gone into how the food is prepped before it's served.
It's like you guys have some processes down or something. Yes. Holy cow! There's a reason that you've been doing this for 65 years.
I got to give it to my grandpa that really nothing's changed as far as he orchestrated the whole thing, and it's worked for a long time.
Well, tell me how he orchestrated the burgers, because obviously you've mentioned you serve a lot of different things, but you're most known for your burgers. And I came in for breakfast sandwiches actually the first time I came in, and then came in for burgers a couple weeks ago. And a couple of my friends, when I told them I was going, I was like, okay, there's a lot of burgers in here. What should I get? And they all said, well, whatever you do, make sure you get at least 2 patties. The patties are small. And I was like, that's interesting. That's not feedback that I really get at most places. But you kind of just went into the science behind that. You guys, it's not that you're trying to skimp on me. You're trying to create a specific mouthfeel for the customer. It's
funny that you say that, yes. So the size of the patty, I think, number one, when Grandpa came out in 1959, you have to remember, people were smaller. They were smaller. They had smaller appetites, and they ate less. There wasn't as much fast food. We were the first fast food in the Midwest. So just even going through a drive-through didn't exist, and going through and having food ready versus having a sit-down restaurant and waiting for it, that didn't exist. And so he had to create something that was able to be done fast, but was able to be done efficiently. And I think that the patties themselves, they're a 10-to-1 patty, which means 1.6 ounce. They're 10 to a pound. And so he could quickly do the math of, this is what it costs us per pound. This is what it costs, per patty. And then he thought, well, also the cook time on that. The cook time on a thinner patty is going to be like this. So a lot of people don't like, the double cheeseburger is our most famous seller, and then the Big Bronco behind it. They're really neck and neck, just depends on the week, but they're pretty much equal, and they both have 2 patties. The Big Bronco is funny because if you Google it, the Big Mac came out, and I believe it's 1968. And we were 9 years before that. We had the Big Bronco, which had the middle bun.
I was going to ask you about that. You beat me to it.
Yeah, they were 9 years after us. And I'm not saying they copied us. We, at that time we would have had, at one time we had 20 stores in Nebraska, Iowa, Kansas, Colorado, Arizona, California, New Mexico. I mean, it goes on and on. But and there's a lot behind that as well. and we can go into it, but as far as the size of the patty and the way that the business was run was just, I think it was simple for the math. It was simple as far as getting it out speed wise, and then again that mouthfeel of having the right meat cheese ratio.
Did you get a lot of comments on that? And is that why the big pony is on the menu
It's
now?
so funny. Thank you. You kind of picked up where I was going with it. So we don't change a lot, but my uncle, I believe, which was my dad's brother, he's passed away about 10, 15 years ago now, but he used to work with my dad in the stores, and they came up with the big pony, which is a double thick patty, which is basically two of our 1.6 ounce patties put together. So it's 3.2 ounces, and it's a thicker patty, and it's also pressed so it's thin and crunchy on the outside and cooked all the way through. But it's that's something that he came up with, and you can get a double pony, which is technically 4 patties because it's 2 patties put together twice. That's 4 patties, and then it has that meat cheese ratio as we stack the cheese on it. But people don't think to do that, and so the newest thing on the menu, I guess, is probably 5 years old now. It's the big SOB.
July 22nd, 2022. That's when you introduced it.
Okay, so yeah,
not quite
about
5.
4 years.
We're working on it, though.
We're working on it. So basically, it's a true story, and I don't mind telling it. So friends of ours own Clancy's in Office West. It's a bar that's real close to Broncos on 120th, and we were down there, and I was having a couple drinks after work, and my buddies are like, gosh, I'd love to have a Bronco burger right now. And I was like, I can run up and get you one. And I was like, what do you want? They're like, just get us whatever you get. I'm like, oh, what I get's not really on the menu. And they're like, and at the time, I'm not a small guy now, but I was over 300 pounds at the time, and I have a big appetite still. And I'm like, well, and they were bigger than me. And I was like, okay, well, I'll grab you what I get. So I don't do a double cheeseburger. I do a triple cheeseburger. And then instead of raw onions, I sauteed the onions. And then you got to throw bacon on there because why not a little extra protein, right?
Right.
And then, there's just pickle and mustard because that's the way we garnish. And it's funny because I don't garnish with pickle and mustard and onion in a backyard burger, but on a Bronco burger, it's just that mustard cuts through the fat of the grease of the meat and the cheese, and it adds that tanginess with a pickle that just works and it bites. And so I did that I put it all together and I brought it to them, and I remember them going, oh my God, that is awesome. They're like, that is a sloppy burger. That's good. What do you call it? I'm like, I don't call it anything. It's not on the menu. They're like, you should put that on the menu. And they're like, I'm serious. I said, I don't know what I'd call it. I guess, we're all a bunch of big SOBs around here. And then we have a lot of South Omaha boys and stuff that are frequenting us. And I thought, well, big SOB, I'm a big SOB. We're from South Omaha, and I said, sauteed onion bacon. There's a big SOB. So it just came to be on the menu, and now it's like our 5th largest seller. So it does really well, and it's good. It's really good, but it's sloppy.
So that's the legend of the big SOB. Because as I went through social media, that's probably maybe it's not the most popular menu item, but it's in terms of what people are putting out there on social and saying, oh my gosh, look at this burger. That's the thing that I saw again and again and again.
So it's not really being innovative. It's basically, that's the ingredients that we had. I didn't want to bring in a whole bunch of different breads and a whole bunch of different products. Again, I'm thinking about the process and I'm thinking about what people would want. And I'm like, well, why wouldn't they want it? I want it. I like it, And so we've talked about, maybe doing a burger where we use the ingredients that we have. Like people have talked about doing like a Laredo burger or something like that, or a rodeo burger or something like that, where we use our hickory sauce and maybe put an onion ring on there and stuff. This is all stuff that you can do right now. You can customize the burger any way you want, but to actually put it on the menu and have it sell is another thing. So you can get creative with it, but I agree with your original, what was recommended to you. Make sure you get a double, but that wasn't the case in 1959. The single cheeseburger was probably our most popular seller, and then double cheeseburger as people's appetites and sizes grew. And it's funny because I see comments all the time online where they're like, that they've gotten cheap, they've skimped on their patties. I'm like, well, have you gotten bigger? Because we haven't changed. So maybe your appetite's gotten bigger.
Changed,
right.
So I find it so interesting. You've brought up several points already about how you've listened to customers, about how customers wanted a bigger patty, so you made the big pony. Mm-hmm. Your friends wanted they didn't even know they wanted a big SOB, but once they had it, they're like, put that on the menu.
Right.
And there are other things, like in March of 2023, you guys added a fish sandwich to the menu.
We've always had the fish sandwich. It may have probably just got on the menu, maybe for to go or something. But we've had it for a long, long time.
Okay,
really since the beginning.
Fair. And then in 2024, you added chili. So the menu has continued to update, and I'm just so curious because I can only imagine how many ideas get thrown at Broncos from customers, from just really anyone. How do you take all those ideas, all the things that people are saying to you, and how do you distill it down and actually say, okay, you know what? It would be good for us to permanently add the fish sandwich to the menu. Or, you know what? Enough people have said it. They want a thicker patty. We'll give them a thicker patty. How do you decide which of those ideas makes sense?
Well, the thing is I think you don't change, you test market stuff. And so with the big SOB, that was going to be just a limited time only. Like the Frankenburger. The Frankenburger is another new one. The Frankenburger is still a limited time, but it's something that Henry came up with, and he asked me to try. And he says, a lot of people don't like all these carbs, and they're getting rid of the carb diets and stuff, going on a lower carb diet. So he's like, so they won't try the Big Bronco. He's like, but if you take that middle bun out and you put a Frankfurter in there, and then we got the extra protein, I said, that might be pretty good. Let me try that. I tried it. I was like, that's pretty darn good. So we put it on the menu. It doesn't sell as much, but it sells, and it's still available and stuff. And it's not really a secret menu. Sometimes it shows up and sometimes it doesn't, depending on how we're designing the menu and stuff. But it's always there. These are things that all the ingredients are there and you can do them. But I guess that's the secret sauce of what you want specifically and how to customize it.
I love the marketing tactics that you keep taking when you say, oh, if you add a bacon or a hot dog or something, that's extra protein.
Right.
That's good. That's bulking. Exactly. We're not talking about the calories or the fat or the sodium. No,
that's not where you go to Broncos for, is cut calories.
Well, I suppose that's true at that point. Yeah, you're not looking for low-cal meals. Talk to me about all-day breakfast.
All-day breakfast.
Because, no fast food restaurants do all-day breakfast anymore. What about you guys allows you to do what McDonald's can't?
Well, I love your question, and I'll go back to Henry because, when I started in 2016, I came from a sales and marketing career in the professional world, and then, decided to come work with the family to take over the family business and not try and break it. And I always wondered too, as an outsider from the restaurant world, why don't they serve breakfast? I don't understand that. Don't be the Gestapo with the breakfast. Give it to me when I want it, And so I said, well, why can't we do breakfast all day? And Henry's like, oh boy. And he's like, you can. We'll do anything you ask us to do. He's like, you're not going to want to do that. I said, well, why not? And he says, let me tell you. You got 6 feet of grill space, right? You got a 6-footer and a 4-footer, but on Leavenworth we got a 6-feeder, so we got 10 or 6 feet of grill. And when you are doing, when you're doing the volume that we're doing, especially during lunch,
eggs take up a lot of space.
Eggs take up more time and they take up more space, and so people are always like, I always want to make sure I get a fresh burger. And, back in the day, when we were the only game in town, there was no other fast food. We would have burgers stacked up literally this high under heat lamps. And people are like, oh my God, that's crazy. They're going to be terrible. No, they would go as fast as we could, because back in the day, nobody really customized. They're not like, no onions on this, take the tomato out. I would say at least 35% of our stuff now is customized, right? Which is fine, but that means that we can't make it as it is on the menu. We'd be much more efficient. It'd be like if you went to Ford and you're like, I want a hot pink Ford, and it's like, well, we'd have to stop production and make that. And we can do that. We're going to have to charge you quite a bit to do that, and that's going to be, a Shelby or something to do that. But it's the same idea. It's a production line, and so if you're trying to, add all these variables, you can't have burgers ready. But we still do. We'll have a stack, maybe 5 or 6 or something, because they'll go immediately, like a Big Bronco double cheeseburger. They're right there. They're going to go that quick. And people see them stacked and they think they're sitting there. No, that stack is boom, gone, boom, up again. Boom, gone, boom, up again. So just going back to the production and stuff, you have to stay as efficient as possible, and you can't add too many different burgers to that production line. Otherwise, you'll break the process.
Okay. Where does breakfast come into all this? That's
so
where we started.
That's where we started. Thanks. I went on a tangent. So it's basically if you have a ring, that's how you have to make the breakfast. You crack an egg and you put it into an egg ring. And so let's say somebody says, I want 12 breakfast sandwiches at noon. Well, we're going to go through 7,500 burgers, and we don't have the burger space to be able to do 36 patties, double patties. That's double that. So the difficult part would be, is there enough grill space? Well, because we don't have a lot of people ordering 12 at a time, then we can do it, and it does happen sometimes where they're like, I want a breakfast box, and they do it at noon. It's like, oh boy, this is, at that point we'll say, you're going to have to pull off and wait. We got to get through the burgers, and then we'll get those done, and then we'll do the breakfast box. But usually it's one or two, and so we can do it, but it's something, like I said, Henry kind of warned me, be careful. So we don't really advertise that a lot. You pulled it up because you did some digging. It's okay. I don't want to break the system, but and then again, if it did get to that where their breakfast is so good, I got to have it at noon every day. And we're selling 12. We would probably have to say breakfast gets off at 11 o'clock. But for now, the system's not broken, so we don't fix it.
Okay, I was curious about that because I know that egg cookery is kind of the thing that breaks down breakfast at a lot of places where it's like, if that's all we're doing, or if we're doing that and sausage, sure, our griddle can handle that, or that sausage and bacon. But if you start throwing burgers and other meats and stuff on there, we don't have the space anymore.
Correct.
So I was like, how does Broncos?
Yeah, if McDonald's has a pre-cooked egg that is in a warming drawer, right? They're just assembling. We're actually cooking from scratch right there with the egg. So,
okay. Take me back. We got to talk about some history here. Who was Bronco Billy, and what do you know about your grandpa, Billy Barnes?
Well, Bronco Billy was he was a legend. A lot of people, there's very few people alive now that remember him because he's died over 50 years ago. He died in 1971. And he was he started where he was working at Prima Drive-In. He owned Prima Drive-In, and my family had some bars and restaurants in Omaha, and that was him and his brother had started that. And they had humble beginnings. They weren't wealthy. It wasn't like just booming. But the story is from my dad and Henry that he had Prima Drive-In, but he was hearing about these fast food. It wasn't in Omaha yet, but McDonald's, I think they were around in like 54 or something, but not in Omaha, right? And so he was seeing this concept, and the story that was told to me is that he went to Chicago for an NRA, National Restaurant Association show, and had seen this, and I think back then, the business proposition would have been to buy into a franchise. And I think because he was so entrepreneurial and already had a successful restaurant, he's like, well, what are they doing that we can't do? And so I think he came up with his own ideas, and obviously they worked. And then in 1962, so we started in 59. In 1962, I've got all the paperwork, all the archives and stuff of the Broncos franchise company came around in 62. So he was starting to sell franchises in 62. I think he'd already opened North 30th. That was 1959. And then 1962 was Leavenworth. And then I believe Bellevue was after that. Then 72nd and Pacific, then 120th. And then he had downtown. So he had probably 6 stores before he started to sell franchises. And I think the franchise agreement was that it couldn't be in Omaha. So there was like one in Council Bluffs. I think there was one in Lincoln. And interesting enough, the one in Lincoln, the guy who does our helps to do some of the radio spots with us, Patrick Stibbs, his father and mother were a Broncos franchise owner. So his father had done business with my grandfather, and then Patrick himself did business with my dad, and now we do business. So this generational thing keeps reoccurring. But as far as who Bronco Billy was, like I said, because I didn't know him, I just know the legacy of him. I guess he was a very charismatic guy. Like he'd come in, walk into a room and say, okay, $50, I get my hat on that hat hanger, and he'd throw it like that, and people would take him on it or not. But he just always, he was the life of the party, and just Mr. Mover and Shaker, and always doing something innovative and new, and it worked. And back those days too, he was selling franchises on handshake deals that was all cash. There was no, so in 1950 or 62, when he was selling those franchises, they were, like I said, franchise agreements between Bill Barnes and the franchisee. So the franchisor was Bill Barnes, not Broncos Holding Company or Broncos as a company. It was Bill Barnes and them. So the way that it happened was he was going in for an ulcer surgery. He was a very hard-headed person and just did the way things that he was going to do just because that's the way he lived his life. And nobody could tell him what to do, but he was, he was a great guy to work with. But they said, but it was going to go Bill's way. But so he says, they said that he's going in for surgery for ulcers, which was kind of routine surgery back in the day. And they don't even do them anymore. They just give you medicines for it. But he was going in for it, and they said, don't eat anything for 24 hours before you go in. He's like, his best friend was Ross Lorello from Ross's Steakhouse, which Ross's was an old Italian steakhouse that was around for years and years, closed down in the 90s and stuff. But it was right next to the 72nd and Pacific location when we were there. And so he says, I'm going in for a steak dinner. Goes in for a steak dinner. They open him up, and he dies of septic shock and on the operating table at age 52, 3 years older than me. So it was kind of like now the franchisees are like, the founder's gone, and we don't really need to pay these franchise dues anymore. If we just change the name, change the recipes a little bit, we can probably get away with that. And so here we have Grandma that takes over this state and national business. And it's not like she was a slouch. She had worked in the stores and stuff, but she wasn't the business mind that my grandfather was. She wasn't at the helm for all those years. She was, definitely his right-hand man and behind him on everything, but she was more of a homemaker at that time. I think when they got started, she put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it. But then at the time that he died, she inherits it. And it was kind of like, wow, gosh, I hadn't worked with all these different, I don't know if she knew all the franchisees, right? Because those were his people that he'd worked with. And so she had to navigate the legal mumbo jumbo of all that kind of stuff as they were building another store. Like the 120th and Pacific was actually built, I think, in 74. But the planning and stuff and the financing and stuff was already in the works in 71 when he passed away. And so his best friend was Tom Kelly. Tom Kelly was a prominent attorney in town, and he was my grandfather's, one of his better friends as well. And my grandma and Tom Kelly ended up getting married. And so my grandfather that I grew up knowing was Papa Tom. And so Tom, luckily, as the attorney and the attorney for Broncos, he helped to navigate that, helped to get the 72nd store, the 120th store, get that to come through to fruition. And it was really a match made in heaven for both the business and for my grandma and for him. I mean, they were married for the rest of their lives. So,
have you ever thought about how different your life would be if all that expansion had continued? I mean, not to be morbid, but
no,
like if your grandpa had,
it's so funny
if
you
he
say
had,
that.
if he lived for longer and he had these aspirations of expanding Broncos nationally, then obviously that's not your priority right now.
Right.
Your life would be completely different.
It is so funny you say that, because my dad has always said, "Oh, we would have been the in and out." I mean, we were growing at that pace, and he goes, we would have all been trust fund babies, that's for sure. He's like, because we were just killing it back then. But that's not the way it shaped up, and you got to understand. So when Grandpa died, then Grandma got the business, and like I say, she had it until probably the late 90s when she was getting older, and she basically had gifted the business to her 4 kids. And, you give 4 kids a toy and they tug on it and they fight. And so there was some family issues that my dad had to navigate through. So if they all own 25% of the business, and they have to come to an agreement on a lot of things, business-wise and direction of the company and all that kind of stuff, which I don't think they did. So it ended up being that my dad basically bought out his siblings and then had taken the business over from about 99, I think, is when he officially kind of took it over. But yeah, it'd be very different. And then, again, Dad will admit too, he's obviously a good businessman because he's kept it alive this entire time. As you said, there's a lot that are going out. We've been faced with, rioting and we've been faced with, pandemic, and we've been faced with, economic hard times and up times and down times. And there's just been so much that it's gone through that, that has put a lot out of business, but we've stayed in business. And he basically, he consolidated. I mean, he had this big debt because he did buy out, 75% of the business from his siblings. And so he says, maybe if I just focus on, the North 30th Street was the first location. He said, I think I'm going to sell that one because it needed a lot of repair, and he already had this massive debt. And he's like, if I sell that one, then that'll give me some capital to put into the company and be able to operate and still make these business payments. And then 72nd Street, they basically tore up Dodge Street, and we had a horrible winter the first year that he had it. And he's like, oh my gosh, that's losing money now, which it shouldn't. But with the construction and with the weather and everything, he says, well, I guess I'll sell that one too. So he sells those to basically pay down the note to be able to stay alive. And then, after that, then, fast forward a decade or so, and, things are going good. Things are going well. And he even opened up another store. He opened up a Rockin' R Broncos. I think it was in Rod Cush's Furniture. I want to say that was maybe 2005 or 6. And that was short-lived. He got a liquor license, and he was in a furniture store. And he's like, it's kind of a harebrained idea, but I thought it, might take off and stuff. But give it a shot, And he only let it stay open maybe a month, and then was like, this isn't working. And then so he kind of didn't really try to expand anymore. It's like, why? Don't fix it if it ain't broke. Just let's focus on what is working, and let's be as efficient with it as possible, and make sure that we keep business and keep business coming. And that's what he did until basically he says, in 2016, he says, I think it's time to bring in some new leadership and just some new blood and another family member, and give it a shot. And I broke a few things when I started too. That's the thing is you talked about the new generation and how do you stay, current, and how do you stay, during COVID, I started in 2016, about 2019, we were having issues. 2020, we were having issues with the bun company because during COVID, they went through a churn of people, and then they laid people off, and then during COVID, they're not selling as much. So their product they would deliver to us, and the bread would be stale. And we're like, no, wait a minute. And we would feel it, and it wouldn't get out to the customer, but we'd send it back and we'd say, what's going on with this? This is, not okay. We can't serve this product. And I won't say who it was, but it was a different bun company. And so we says, we really got to fix this. And this was me. And I like I say, we generationally work with companies. We've been working with Rotellas since 1959 because they do some of the specialty stuff for us, like the patty melt sandwich. They do the marble rye bread, which is great. And I thought, well, who better? They've been around since like 1915, and they're an Omaha icon, and we're an Omaha icon, and I know that they can have a fresh, great product because they're here in Omaha. Why wouldn't we partner with them? And so, after the third or fourth time of going round and round with the bun company, I was like, we've given it a shot. It's just not working for whatever reason, and we can part as friends, but we're going to have to go another direction. So what I learned by breaking it was I says, okay, here's my marketing background, my SEO and SEM and search engine optimization, all that stuff. I said, well, why don't we just put this on blast that Broncos now partners with Rotellas? And it was like, oh, wow, two Omaha icons. And I had Jim Rotella, which is the grandson of the original owner, or maybe great-grandson, shaking hands with Henry, because I kind of try and stay out of the spotlight. I really want the employees to shine and the food to shine. It's not about the Barnes family. It's really never has been. It's always about the employees and the customers, really. And so I had pictures of Henry and Jim Rotella and everything, and it goes good for maybe a week or two, and then everybody's like, love Broncos, love Rotellas, hate them together. And they're like, because we go back to the thinner patty. Yeah. Well, you got a thicker bun, and if you did a double cheeseburger or above, it was fantastic, and it is awesome. But if you do a single cheeseburger, so we started saying, well, should we do a kid's bun? And now that's not quite the right size. And then they're having to do it a separate bake for just us for two stores. We do a lot of volume, but not quite enough for a separate run and kind of stuff. So, I remember calling up Jim, and Jim knew too. He pays attention to the feedback and stuff. And it was just pretty much all negative feedback. And it was like, gosh, you're great, and I guess we're great, but we're going to have to go to a different bun that is just more going to fit with our product. And he says, totally agree. There's no hard feelings. We still do business together, but just not on the hamburger bun. So we do a Sara Lee bun now, which is a fantastic. And that was the original. And so they're fantastic, and that's what they bake it 5 days a week and deliver. And so they're awesome. I mean, we appreciate that. But like I said, I learned that you don't change anything at Broncos, and if you do, you don't go publish it to the world like, hey, look, we got a new buns, aren't we great? It's like, no, I didn't want you to change anything. Go back to it. I still read comments now that are 4 years old, or that they're new, but 4 years ago we went back to the Sara Lee bun, and since they changed the bun, never going back. And I can't go back and say, well, we changed it back, because then you're just doing that, opening the can of worms again. So it was basically, I just learned that, do what you do, keep an eye on the pulse of the people and listen to what their comments are and act on it. But, you don't necessarily have to advertise it in front of everybody.
What is that like for you? Because, I mean, some people might look at that and say, well, that job sounds easy. All you got to do, like Broncos has all its processes in place. You just keep your hand on the wheel, keep it straight, and you're not going to crash. But, A, I'm sure that's not true. There are a lot of things you have to adjust to. But, B, you also, you see, like, the idea of partnering with Rotella's. That seems like a home run idea for both sides.
Right.
So, like, you see opportunities like that, and you're just like, well, we got to at least explore it. So what is that like for you, having to balance those two things of just knowing so many people just want you to go straight and they don't want anything to change, but you also want to explore, you want to play, you want to see what opportunities there are?
Well, it goes back to, I think it's similar to being like a celebrity, okay? Do some of these celebrities, do they read all of the comments that are online about them? Because there's so much hate mail, right? And we get a lot of hate mail too. But what's interesting is, I think I told you my background was in search engine optimization and marketing and digital marketing. And I used to consult to hospitals, was my main client. But about, it was starting to become popular to reply to all of these social media posts. So if you'll look, we have literally thousands of comments on Google. I started our Google My Business is what it was called back in 2016, but it's the Google business profile. And, back then you would get like Foursquare, Yelp, and, Yahoo, and you'd get a bunch of different, Facebook reviews and stuff. But then Google kind of started to take over, where it was pretty much that's the one that's front and center to most people on the reviews and stuff. And then so basically it's you look at these reviews and like I said, do you drive yourself nuts over man, they really hate us, or do you say we're not for everybody, and let's find a common denominator of what people are saying and parse that out to what action can we take to make it to give the people what they want, right? But without changing the whole system. And that, like I said, that kind of gave birth to, well, if they think we have thin patties, let's stack them up for them. They're not going to say, give me a quadruple patty and give me this. So you just make that burger and you put it on the menu. And if it sells, and okay, well, then that is what they wanted. And so I do read all the comments, and that is hard because it is my baby. It is like, it's my family business, and it's something I care about, and it's something all of our employees care about. We care about the way that people perceive our product and our people, and so we want to make sure that we're staying front and center. But we also want to say we can't change the whole thing. I'll give you another, for instance, like with chicken, right? Chicken, we buy the whole bird, right? So the whole bird would be, you've got 8 pieces of chicken, right? You've got you've only got 2 legs on a piece of chicken. You've only got 2 wings. So when somebody wants, I want 16 wings. Well, we don't have it priced as 16 wings, and it's not. We don't have them cooked that way either. It'd be a separate cook, and then we wouldn't be able to sell wings for the rest of the day for everybody who did want just 1 or 2 wings as a 2-piece or a 4-piece. So you just look at it and say, we're not a chicken restaurant. We can't appeal to everybody, and I don't want to take it off the menu because it's only about 4% of sales, but it's darn good. We hand bread the chicken. It's fresh, never frozen. It's hand breaded, and it sits in the refrigerator for the breading to set up. It's pressure fried. It's really, really good, but it is not super profitable for us, and it definitely backs the process up, and it does cause some strife as far as like what people how they want to order it and stuff. So you just keep doing what you can do. You can't be all things to all people, and you go from there. But listening to the feedback is important.
That is hard because, I mean, I know this personally. I can have 99 people comment positive to me on my post saying, hey, you're doing a great job. These pictures are amazing. You introduced me to my new favorite spot last week. Thank you. and that one comment where
that
somebody
one
says
negative
something
that sticks
mean
in your head
all day long, it
It's
stays
just like,
there.
why is that there?
But the thing that you've got going for you is you got 66 years of excellence to back you up, and you're like, well, if we really did suck like you say we did, we wouldn't be around.
Right.
We're still here.
And you never want to take that arrogant standpoint of
no.
But I see what you're saying. You have to stay
more
true to what you are.
Yeah. It's we're here. I was being flippant.
I know.
it's we're here for a reason.
Yeah.
We have our processes in place. We've been successful.
Right.
This, Joe Blow wants 16 egg sandwiches and 20 wings. He doesn't understand logistically.
We just can't do it.
Why it can't happen.
Right.
So
that's
that'll make
true.
sense. For you personally, you obviously grow up in the Barnes family. You're very familiar with what Broncos is and how important it is, and yet you went in a different career path.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Well, it's a good question. It's really, you think about it, and do I want to be in corporate America where you're not really in control? It goes back to where you asked about the employees. Why are they there so long, right? Why isn't somebody in the same business at, a big publicly traded company? You don't see people there for 50 and 60 years a lot, 40 years, 30 years. You just don't see that. They either get pushed out or culture changes and they're out. With me, it was more, I was at the pinnacle of my career, and it was where I was working 15-hour days, and I had a team, and we were working constantly. I mean, as you do this digital media stuff, you do this business, and you're doing it on the side, and you're a blessed individual to be able to parse your time out that way, because I know how in-depth that is. There's a lot to it. There's way more moving parts to it than people see. And so that said, I was running hundreds of campaigns at a time for hundreds of different hospitals at a time with a small team, and it was exhausting. And it was, to the point where I'm like, yes, the money's good. The hours are terrible. I'm never off. I never have any time. And it was just one of those days where my parents had called me up, and it was one of those days where it was a really long day, and I was just stressed. And it was like, they said, had you ever thought about doing anything with Broncos? And at the time, I lived in Dallas for 20 some odd years, and then moved with the same company. They moved me to Denver, I think 2012. So this was 2016. I'd been there 4 years. I was happy in Denver. But like I said, I was so busy. And it was kind of like, if I were to do this, it would be, number one, not for the money. It would be meaningful. It would be something that I love Broncos. I've loved it since I was a little kid. And I miss it because I lived in Denver and I didn't get to have it all the time. And I could have an impact on the family business. And, in lieu of physically taking care of my older relatives, this would be a way of financially securing the future and making sure that they're going to be okay and they're going to be taken care of. My parents have since moved to Arizona now. But again, they're involved in the business. We talk often, and they're definitely heavily involved. But it's more, this is not an obligation, but more of an honor to be able to take on that role and take it to a third generation and hopefully beyond. And so it's something that it resonates more with who I am than just being a busybody in corporate America.
Mm-hmm. Now, something I think is really interesting about you is you've talked about so many processes that you guys have in place. And we've mostly just talked about the food processes, not even the business side of things. But, things that are set in place, machines that you don't want to break at Broncos. And it's one thing to grow up with that your whole life, or to start as a 14-year-old, teenager or whatever, and you're kind of learning station by station or something. You had to learn it kind of all at once. In 2016, I'm sure you knew some of it.
No, I did not.
You did?
I did not. I had never worked in a restaurant, never been a waiter, never.
So, you are a baby being tossed into the deep end of the pool, and you're saying, swim, kid.
That's exactly what it was.
What was that like for you?
Well, I go back to God bless Henry Rice. I'm not kidding, because he had already had 60 years or close to 60 years of experience and knew everything about everything. I would ask him about stuff, about history and stuff, and he's like, I don't know if that was the 70s or the 90s, Blake, to be honest with you. I know what happened, and here's what it was. But to learn that trial by fire was, like you said, I did go in when I first started, and I worked literally scrubbing the floors. I remember my first day I was on Leavenworth, and I was scrubbing the floors, and my dad walked in the back door at lunch, and I was 40 years old, scrubbing the floors, and he's like, "That's good. You want to have lunch?" And so, we had Broncos and sat back, and I remember thinking, gosh, this is really, really not what the world that I came from, but it's something that is a labor of love, and it's something that you have to love and care about to be able to do some of the physical hard work, right? And Henry had been doing that for so long, and it was an honor to work with them and see the blood, sweat, and tears literally that go into making a restaurant go. It is a whole different world than corporate America, and it's physically draining. It is really, really difficult. There's a lot of work. Like I say, when it starts at 4:30 and you leave at 10, there's nobody really that works from 4:30 to 10, except, I have to be available pretty much. If something happens with the building or something at 5 in the morning, which it has, you need to know about it and be able to respond. But the point is I guess. I don't know. I think I'm going off on a tangent. What was the original question?
The original, A, stop apologizing for tangents. We're on a podcast. Right. Tangents are great.
Yeah.
B, I was just asking, what was it like for you just being thrown into all this and having to learn all of it at once? And I think you did a great job explaining it.
You make mistakes. Yeah. You make mistakes and you learn. And luckily, like I said, the culture is not, we're going to fire you. It's, hey, this isn't right. So we have to fix this as a family and as a business, and let's get it done, and let's go at it again and get it done. One of the things, again, one of my bright ideas coming from corporate world and then trying to throw money at a problem would be like, I remember we had a fryer that was like from 1989. And we could either fix the pot, which is the fry pot itself, by welding it and taking it down and welding it, and we'd have to move another fryer in while that one was gone, or getting a new one. And I'm like, Henry's like, I'm telling you, just fix it. And my parents, they don't work physically in the stores as well, and a lot of times they'd be on my side. They're like, just replace it. It's okay. We can replace it. So that's just one specific example. And Henry's like, I'm telling you, they don't make them like they used to. I'm like, I know, but it's going to take weeks to fix this, literally, or weeks to build another one and put that one in, and then everything will be new. And so he's like, well, you do what you're going to do, but I would say fix it. Well, one of them I fixed, and one of them I didn't. I bought a new one. That was in 2017, and by 2020, that 2017 new one that I had, we've replaced again. And I won't mention the brand name, but it's the top of the line brand name, because we do go through, our fryers with our French fries. We're doing almost a ton of potatoes a day between both stores, literally thousands of pounds. And so they get beaten up, and you're shaking fries in them, and the fry basket's banging on it. Well, come to find out, why did this new pot get a hole in it? After 3 years, it's not that the people are being more abusive with it. They're always being abusive. It's a fast-paced environment. You got to shake the fries and hang them. There wasn't a process change. The metal changed. The actual steel that they make them out of, is Chinese steel nowadays, and it's thinner, and it's not as durable. It doesn't last as long, and so fixing the old pot was probably a good idea. But there are things like that, that you try and make better, and that they're not better with new. So some of the stuff that you can. Like refrigerators and stuff. The refrigerators, there's some, that are 30, 40 years old, and the refrigeration type of refrigerant that they use, the chemical that they use to charge it is different, and so you have to upgrade it and stuff, but it doesn't last as long, and so you just learn. That's the real long answer of it is you learn, and you take into consideration what the people that know more than you have to say, and 50% of the time I took it, and 90% of the time that was a good idea. but yeah, like I say, the only way that you can learn is just through trial and error.
Well, you've learned. I'm sure you're continuing to learn.
Yeah, definitely every day.
But you have kept this legacy going. Yeah. Broncos continues to be just a beloved Omaha institution. I mean, it's amazing. When I post on social media about it, there are just so many people, that, especially people from out of town, that'll comment and be like, "Oh, I miss that so much. I haven't had a Broncos burger in 7 years. I want it." So I want to commend you on continuing that legacy, keeping it going. It was funny. Off the mics, when we were walking in here, you said, you'd never been on a podcast.
Right.
You're like, oh, is this going to be like Joe Rogan? And I promise you, I was like, well, it's not going to be 3 hours. I feel like I could talk to you for 3 hours.
I appreciate it.
This has been just a fascinating conversation, Blake. Unfortunately, we are up against the clock. I got to respect your time here. Thank you so much for coming on and doing this. It took me forever to get to Broncos. I'll admit it. I waited way too long, and I finally went. And as soon as I bit into that Broncos burger, I was just like, I get it.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't a gourmet burger,
right?
Like that I would pay $15 for at an upscale restaurant. But this just feels right. Yeah. This is just good. And these fries, I just want to cram them into my face. Broncos continues to be a success. Thank you for all the hard work you put into it. Thank you for giving the time of the podcast today.
Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it, Dan. Thank you.
Omaha, as always, thanks for eating with us.